The sun was high and warm, a perfect kind of Saturday afternoon heat that made the cool, blue water of the pool seem like the best idea in the world. The man floating there, letting the gentle current from the filters drift him along, had earned this quiet. His name was Elias Vance, and this house, his view of the rolling green hills, was his dream made real. He had built a company from an idea in his college dorm room into something that had made him a very wealthy man. This property, with its clean modern lines and the infinity pool that looked like it spilled right into the sky, was his reward. It was more than a house. It was a promise he'd made to himself. A place of peace. He lived in one of those beautiful, quiet neighborhoods where the houses were far apart, hidden by trees and long driveways. It was the kind of place people moved to for the silence. Elias was the first and only black man to own a home on this particular ridge. He knew that when he bought the land. It didn't bother him then. He believed that success, and being a good neighbor, would smooth over any unspoken questions. Right now, the only sounds were the hum of the pool pump, a few birds in the tall pines, and the soft lap of water against the tile. He closed his eyes, feeling the sun on his face. The sound of a car engine, moving too slowly up the winding road, broke the stillness. Then came the crunch of tires on his gravel driveway. Elias opened his eyes, thinking maybe it was a delivery. But when he turned his head, he saw the stark black and white of a local police cruiser rolling to a stop near his front walkway. A familiar, cold feeling settled in his stomach, one that had nothing to do with the water. Two officers got out, a man and a woman. Their uniforms were crisp, their faces unreadable behind sunglasses. They walked with a purposeful stride past the front door and straight around the side of the house, towards the back patio and the pool. Elias stood up, the water dripping from him. He grabbed a towel, not for modesty, but for a sense of putting a barrier between himself and whatever was about to happen. "Afternoon," the male officer said. His voice was flat, official. He didn't smile. "Good afternoon," Elias replied, his own voice calm and even. He made sure to keep his hands visible, drawing his arms slowly. "Can I help you, officers?" "We got a call about a noise complaint," the female officer said. She was looking past him, her gaze scanning the back of the house, the expensive outdoor furniture, as if taking inventory. Elias almost laughed, but it wasn't funny. The silence around them was so deep you could hear a leaf fall. "A noise complaint?" He echoed. "From who?" "There hasn't been any noise. It's just been me, here in the water." The male officer, his name tag read Braxton, shifted his weight. "We have to respond to all calls, sir. We're just checking it out. Can you tell us what you're doing here?" The question hung in the air. Elias felt the chill in his stomach spread. He was a 42-year-old man being asked what he was doing in his own backyard. "I'm swimming," he said, the words simple and heavy. "In my pool." "At my house. This is your residence?" Officer Braxton asked. There was a slight tilt to his head, a tone that suggested he was waiting for Elias to trip up. "Yes, it is." Elias kept his voice level, though every instinct was screaming. He knew this dance. He had heard stories from friends, read the news. He knew that showing anger, or even frustration, could turn a simple, stupid moment into something dangerous. "We're going to need to see some identification," the female officer, Dale, said. It wasn't a request. Elias nodded slowly. "My wallet is inside." "On the kitchen counter?" "I can get it." He moved carefully, walking towards the sliding glass door. He was hyper-aware of their eyes on his back, of his wet footprints on the pale stone patio. He felt, intensely, like a stranger in his own home. He returned with his driver's license. Officer Braxton took it, studying it closely, comparing the address on the plastic to the house around him. He handed it to his partner, who did the same. "This just shows who you are," Officer Braxton said. "You got anything that proves you live here? A utility bill or something?" The request was so petty, so designed to create a hurdle, that Elias felt a flash of hot anger. He pushed it down. "I can show you a digital bill on my phone," he said. He walked back inside, feeling the absurdity of it all. He was being made to perform, to prove his right to exist in this space of luxury he had created. He came back out, phone in hand, and pulled up the most recent electricity statement. He held the screen out. Officer Dale leaned in, looked at it, then nodded to her partner. The energy between them shifted, just slightly. The confrontation had hit a wall. They had no reason to be here, and they knew it. "All right," Officer Braxton said, handing the license back. His tone was different now, not apologetic, but businesslike, as if closing a file that had been a waste of time. "We had to check. You have a good day." They turned and walked back the way they came, their boots loud on the gravel. Elias stood on his patio, towel around his shoulders, watching the cruiser back down his driveway and disappear. The beautiful quiet of the afternoon was ruined. The sun felt harsh now, not warm. The pool water looked less inviting. He looked out at his view, the one he had worked for his entire life. The encounter had lasted less than 10 minutes, but it had changed everything. It was a reminder that in the eyes of some, no amount of success, no high fence, no property deed, could erase the simple fact of the color of his skin. He wasn't just a homeowner to them. He was a black man in a place they didn't expect a black man to be. And that was enough to warrant an investigation. Elias took a deep breath. The sting of humiliation was fading, replaced by something colder, sharper, and more determined. This was his sanctuary. They had broken its peace. And as he stood there, the seed of a plan, a precise, powerful, and patient plan, began to take root in his mind. This would not happen again. Not to him. And if he had his way, not to anyone else they might decide to bother. But he wouldn't yell or make a scene. He would use the very tools that had built this house in the first place: intelligence, strategy, and undeniable proof. The quiet of the house felt different on Monday morning. It wasn't the peaceful quiet of before. It was a heavy, thinking kind of quiet. Elias sat at the long, polished table in his home office, a cup of coffee going cold beside him. The beautiful view out the window, which usually inspired him, now just felt like a scene from a play. A play where he was supposed to know his lines, but the other actors kept changing the script. The hot anger from Saturday was gone. In its place was a deep, cold clarity. He had spent his whole career solving problems. Big, complicated problems with data and code and logic. What happened at his pool wasn't just rude. It was a system failure. And Elias knew you couldn't fix a system by yelling at a single broken part. You needed to understand the flaw, gather evidence, and then rebuild it so the error couldn't happen again. His first move was careful, almost boring. He called his lawyer, a man who had handled his company's legal work for years. He explained what happened, his voice flat and factual. "I need to file a formal complaint," he said. "The official way. Follow every step." He knew, and his lawyer knew, that this complaint would probably end up in a drawer somewhere. It was a necessary piece of paper, the first move in a much longer game. It showed he was using the proper channels. But Elias wasn't putting his faith in channels. He was putting his faith in data. Over the next few days, he began to work his connections. Not with anger, but with a quiet, serious purpose. He had friends from his university days, people now in city government, in journalism, in civil rights organizations. He reached out, not for a fight, but for information. He asked careful questions. "Has anyone else had issues like this in that neighborhood?" Or, what's the process for looking at patrol patterns? Slowly, carefully, he started to build a picture. A friend of a friend, who worked with police data, was able to get him something public, but hard to find. Years of anonymized dispatch logs for his zip code. Elias didn't want names. He wanted patterns. He stayed up late, his laptop glowing in the dark office, mapping the calls. What he saw was a story told in codes and timestamps. Calls for suspicious persons or possible trespassing at homes were rare on his ridge. But when they did happen, they almost always clustered around the few homes owned by people of color. The calls for loud parties or barking dogs, the typical neighbor stuff, were spread evenly. The suspicion calls were not. It was a bias so clear in the numbers, it took his breath away. This wasn't just about him. It was a habit that, at the same time, he made a decision about his home. His sanctuary had been invaded. He would make it a fortress of truth. He called a security company, one used by museums and tech campuses. He didn't want a loud alarm. He wanted silent, perfect eyes. A team came in and worked for 2 days. They installed small, high-resolution cameras at every corner of the property. Not just one at the front door. Cameras at the gate, along the driveway, covering the entire backyard and pool area from 4 different angles. Each one could see a license plate from 100 feet away, even at night. Each one recorded sound. They were weatherproof, hidden in dark housings, and their feeds didn't just go to a box in his basement. They streamed live to a secure, locked server online. A digital vault that could never be erased or tampered with. He stood in his backyard after they left, testing the system on his phone. He panned from the view of the front gate, to the driveway, to the pool. The image was crystal clear. He could hear the leaves rustling. His home was now one of the most documented private properties in the county. It felt strange. It felt like he was preparing for a war on his own lawn. But the goal wasn't to capture a crime. It was to capture the absence of one. To have proof forever of what should have been an ordinary day. The final piece was the most personal. He sat down and wrote. He typed out everything he remembered from Saturday. The time, the exact words the officers used, the way they walked around the side of the house instead of going to the front door, the feeling in his gut. He described the weather, the color of the patrol car, the model. He wrote it like a scientist writing a report. He saved it, dated it, and backed it up. Then he waited. He went back to work at his company. He had dinners. He tried to swim in his pool again, though the first time he got in, he kept looking toward the driveway. But he was not just waiting nervously. He was waiting purposefully. He had set a trap, but not with cheese or steel. He had set a trap with the simple, predictable pattern of bias he had seen in the data. He had made his home a place where the next time that pattern repeated itself, it wouldn't be his word against theirs. It would be the unblinking, high-definition truth against a lie. He knew, with a cold certainty, that they would come back. The data said they would. The habit was too strong. And when they did, he would be ready. Not with his fists, not with shouts, but with a truth so bright and clear it would leave no room for doubt. The man who had built a fortune by seeing the future in lines of code was now using that same skill to protect his present. He was no longer just a homeowner. He was an architect, quietly building a case, brick by digital brick. 3 weeks passed. The season began to turn, the heat softening just a little. Elias worked to reclaim the peace of his home. He swam laps in the pool in the early evenings, the rhythmic motion helping to clear his mind. He told himself the formal complaint, the new cameras, the data he'd gathered, it was all just insurance. Maybe it would be enough. Maybe the word had quietly spread through the small police department. Leave the guy on the ridge alone. But the data he'd studied told a different story. And Elias trusted data more than hope. It was a Thursday afternoon. He was hosting two old friends from his college days, both of whom were in town for a tech conference. One was a software engineer. The other ran a venture capital fund. They were successful, sharp-dressed men, laughing easily as they sat in the padded chairs by the pool, the water shimmering behind them. They were discussing a new idea, the kind of talk that was half business, half dream. All three of them were black. Elias had just brought out a pitcher of iced tea when he saw it, the slow, familiar crawl of a black and white SUV up his driveway on the security monitor he kept discreetly on a side table. A different model this time, but the purpose was the same. The cold feeling shot through him again, but it was quickly swallowed by a wave of grim focus. The trap he had built was about to be sprung. "We're about to have company," he said, his voice calm but flat. His friends followed his gaze to the monitor, their conversation dying. They saw the SUV stop and two officers get out. One was Officer Braxton. The other was a new man, taller, with a stiff way of standing. "Again?" His friend, the engineer, asked, his voice a mixture of disbelief and anger. Elias gave a single slow nod. "Just follow my lead. Say nothing. Let me talk." He reached into his pocket and opened the recording app on his phone, then set the phone down on the table, screen facing up. The little red dot began to glow. The 4 hidden cameras around the pool were already rolling, feeding their silent, multi-angle testimony to the cloud. The officers didn't go to the front door. They walked straight around the side of the house, just like last time. Their boots were heavy on the stone. Officer Braxton's face was set in a neutral mask, but his eyes took in the scene. The 3 well-dressed men, the expensive patio, the pitcher of tea. His partner, whose name tag read Greeley, scanned the group with a colder, more direct stare. "Afternoon," Officer Braxton said, not smiling. "Officers," Elias replied, standing up. He kept his body relaxed, his hands visible. "What can we do for you today?" Officer Greeley spoke this time. His voice was louder, meant to carry authority. "We have a report of a possible trespasser at this residence. We need to verify everyone here is supposed to be on the property." The statement hung in the air, so absurd it was almost insulting. A trespasser sitting in a pool chair, drinking iced tea. "There are no trespassers here," Elias said, each word measured. "These are my guests. We are having a private meeting. We're going to need to see identification from everyone," Officer Greeley said, taking a step forward. This was the moment Elias had been waiting for. The overreach. "You are on private property," Elias said, his voice gaining a new, firmer edge. "You have no reasonable suspicion of a crime. My guests are not required to show you their IDs." Officer Braxton shifted. "Sir, we're just trying to establish everyone's right to be here. It'll be easier if everyone cooperates." Elias saw his friend, the venture capitalist, start to reach for his back pocket, his face tight with the desire to just make it end. "Don't," Elias said gently but firmly, without looking away from the officers. Then, to Braxton, "You have established my right to be here. You are standing in my backyard. My guests' rights are protected. Your stated reason for being here, a possible trespasser, is false. I am asking you now to leave my property." A flush crept up Officer Greeley's neck. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not in a place like this. He looked at the other 2 men, who were sitting perfectly still, watching silently. He took another step, closer to the seated friend. "Sir, I need you to stand up and provide identification." "Do not touch my guests," Elias's voice cut through the air. It was not a shout, but it was a command, clear and hard as steel. He moved slightly, placing himself more directly between the officer and his friend. "You have no legal basis for this demand. You are escalating a situation without cause. I'm telling you for the second time, Leave. Now. The tension was a physical thing, thick enough to choke on. Officer Greeley's hand hovered near his belt. His jaw was clenched. He was weighing his options, his pride battling the suddenly clear reality that he was being recorded from multiple angles, that the homeowner was quoting the law back to him, and that he had walked into a scenario with no good exit. Officer Braxton, who had been here before, seemed to sense the trap. He put a light hand on his partner's arm. "Let's go," he muttered, his eyes not meeting Elias's. Greeley pulled his arm away, but the moment was broken. He shot a last, hard look at the group, a look full of pure resentment. Without another word, they turned and walked back the way they came, their retreat feeling rushed, less official than their arrival. No one spoke until the sound of the Sioux's engine had faded completely. The quiet of the hills returned, but it was a shocked, fragile quiet. His friend let out a long, shaky breath. "I can't believe that just happened." Elias finally picked up his phone and stopped the recording. He looked at the video files already syncing to his secure folder. He had it all. The demand for IDs, the false premise, the aggressive posture, the near contact, his own calm defiance. From 4 different angles, in perfect high definition, with crystal clear audio. The fear and anger in his gut were still there, churning. But on top of it was a layer of cold, solid satisfaction. He had been ready. They had done exactly what the data said they would do. They had provided the proof with their own actions. "Believe it," Elias said, finally turning to his friends. His face was serious, but there was a determined light in his eyes. "Now, we have work to do. Would you two be willing to sign sworn statements about what just happened? Every detail, you remember. He wasn't just a homeowner anymore, or even just a tech guy with cameras. He was now a man with evidence, and he knew exactly what he had to do with it." The house was quiet again, but the kind of quiet that comes after a storm. Elias's friends had left, their goodbyes heavy with a mix of anger and support. They promised their statements, whatever he needed. Now, Elias was alone in his office. The setting sun threw long orange shadows across the room, but he didn't turn on the lights. The glow from his computer screen lit his face. On the screen were 4 video windows, each showing the same scene from a different angle. He watched it all again, his expression unreadable. He saw the officer's aggressive step forward, heard the demanding tone in his own voice when he said, "Do not touch my guests." It was a powerful, damning record. But Elias knew that a video on a phone was just a video. It could be ignored, explained away, buried. To make it matter, it had to become part of something bigger. It had to tell a story that couldn't be denied. He worked through the night, not with rage, but with the careful focus of a master craftsman. He was building his case. First, he edited the video. He didn't change a thing. Instead, he made it clearer. He created a single split-screen view that showed all 4 camera angles at once, so there was no doubt about what happened from every perspective. He added small, plain text titles: date, time, Officer Braxton, Officer Greeley, claim, report of a trespasser. He let the footage speak for itself. The final product was 6 cold, undeniable minutes. Then he turned to the data. He took the dispatch logs he had obtained. With clean, simple charts, he showed the pattern, the stark difference in the types of calls to certain homes on the ridge. A child could have seen the bias in the colorful bars on his graph. He printed out the formal complaint he had filed after the first incident, showing that the department had been officially warned. Finally, he wrote a narrative. Not a rant. A simple chronological story. On Saturday, June 12th, I was alone at my home. He wrote about the first visit, the feeling, the request for a utility bill. Then he wrote about the second. He presented it not as an emotional appeal, but as a factual report. Here is what happened. Here is the proof. Here is the pattern that proves it wasn't an accident. By morning, he had a dossier. A digital folder containing the multi-angle video, the data analysis, the timeline, and the sworn statements from his friends. It was airtight. Now came the decision. Where to send it? The local police internal affairs? The town's small newspaper? He knew those were dead ends. The system would protect its own. He needed a force bigger than local politics. He made 2 calls. The first was to a lawyer, but not just any lawyer. He called a woman who had been a federal civil rights attorney for the Justice Department before starting her own firm. She had a reputation for being fierce, meticulous, and terrifying to opposing counsel. He sent her the dossier. 2 hours later, she called back. Her voice was sharp with interest. "This is one of the cleanest presentations of a pattern and practice case I've ever seen from a private citizen," she said. "They will settle, and we will make sure the settlement includes real change." The second call was to an old friend from college, a man who was now a senior producer for a major national investigative news program. Elias didn't send him the dossier yet. He just told him the story, briefly, calmly. "I have it all on video," he said, "and the data to show it's not just me." His friend was silent for a moment, then said, "Send me everything. This is a national story." Elias knew the power of the press, but he was careful. He didn't want a screaming, dramatic news segment. He wanted journalism. He gave the producer everything, with one condition: they could not run the story until the federal lawsuit was filed in court. The lawsuit and the news story had to hit at the same time, creating a wave too big to stop. A week later, it happened. In the quiet federal courthouse downtown, Elias's new lawyer filed a substantial lawsuit. It didn't just name officers Braxton and Greeley. It named the police chief, the city, and the entire department. It accused them of a pattern of discriminatory policing, of violation of civil rights, and of emotional distress. It asked for a significant monetary settlement, but more importantly, it demanded a complete overhaul of patrol protocols and training. Minutes after the lawsuit hit the court's electronic system, the news story broke online. The headline was straightforward, but brutal. Data and video reveal pattern of police bias in affluent community. The article was not an opinion piece. It was a fact-by-fact walkthrough, using Elias's own charts and the clear split-screen video. They had even gotten a comment from a retired police captain from another state, who watched the video and said, "This is a textbook example of a pretextual stop. There is no legal justification for that interaction." The story did not stay local. It was picked up by news networks, by websites, by social media. The video spread everywhere. People debated it on cable news. Legal experts dissected it on podcasts. The clear, multi-angle view made all the difference. There was no he said, she said. There was only what everyone could see and hear. The city was thrown into chaos. The police chief gave a short, tense press conference, saying the department would review the matter thoroughly. The city council, facing a blistering federal lawsuit and a public relations nightmare, went silent. Reporters camped outside the police station. Elias did not give any interviews. He stayed in his home, watching the storm unfold from his living room. His phone buzzed constantly with messages, some supportive, some ugly. He ignored them all. He felt no joy in this, only a grim sense of necessity. He had taken a private humiliation and turned it into a public fact. He had used the tools of his success analysis technology strategy to fight back. The officers who had come to his pool had seen a black man where they didn't expect one. Now, the whole world was seeing them, and the system that allowed them to act that way. The cost was beginning to come due. The storm of public attention did not blow over quickly. It settled in like a heavy fog over the small city. For weeks, The story dominated local conversations. The national news segment had done its job perfectly. It presented the facts so clearly that there was almost nothing to debate. You either believed the video and the data, or you didn't believe in facts at all. Inside City Hall, panic turned into a quiet, desperate strategy. The federal lawsuit was a monster at the door. Fighting it would mean a long, ugly, and very public court battle. Every detail of the department's history would be dragged into the light. The financial cost would be enormous. The city's lawyers knew they were in a terrible position. They had to make it go away. Elias and his attorney met with them in a series of cold, formal meetings. The city's representatives were polite, but their offers started small. They offered a modest settlement for his trouble. They suggested the officers would be given sensitivity training. Elias's lawyer would simply slide a copy of the lawsuit across the table, her finger resting on the demand for a full, independent investigation into the department's practices. "We are not here to be paid off," she would say, her voice calm and icy. "We are here for institutional change. That is not negotiable." Meanwhile, the city council ordered that independent investigation. They had no choice. It was the only thing that might save them. A former judge from another county was brought in. She was known for being fair, tough, and uninterested in local politics. Her team was given full access to everything: the dispatch logs Elias had highlighted, the personnel files of the officers, the complaint histories. Elias provided his dossier. He sat for a long interview with the investigators, walking them through every moment, every feeling, every piece of data. He was a compelling witness because he wasn't emotional. He was a problem solver explaining a critical flaw in the system. The investigation took a month. It was the longest month of Elias's life, even longer than the wait after he installed the cameras. The not knowing was a weight. He tried to work, to swim, to live normally, but a part of him was always braced for the outcome. Finally, the report was finished. It was hundreds of pages long, but its conclusions were summarized in a few devastating paragraphs made public by the city. The independent investigator found that Officers Braxton and Dale, from the first visit, had engaged in a repeated pattern of discriminatory conduct, using minor pretenses to investigate residents of color without legitimate cause. It found that their immediate supervisor, a sergeant, had ignored clear warning signs in their behavior and failed to provide proper oversight. Most damningly, it connected their actions to a wider, unspoken culture within the department where such proactive patrols in wealthy neighborhoods were encouraged. Without regard for the racial bias it inevitably enforced, the city council called a special meeting. The room was packed with reporters and citizens. Elias watched it live on a local news stream, sitting alone in his office. He felt his heart pounding in his ears. One by one, the council members spoke. They used words like deeply regrettable, systemic failure, and a breach of public trust. Then, the police chief, looking older and tired, took the podium. In a halting voice, he announced that, based on the report's findings, Officers Braxton and Greeley were being terminated immediately. Their sergeant was also being let go. The chief also announced a sweeping new policy. All suspicious person calls in residential areas would require supervisor approval before a patrol could engage, and every such engagement would be automatically recorded and reviewed. Mandatory, in-depth bias training would begin for the entire department. It was over. They had lost their jobs. The change he had demanded was being implemented. A week later, Elias stood on the steps of the federal courthouse beside his lawyer. A small crowd of journalists and cameras waited. He had agreed to one final statement. The lawsuit had been settled. The financial terms were confidential, but the public reforms, the policy changes, the training were part of the binding agreement, enforceable by a judge. He stepped to the microphones. He looked tired, but his eyes were clear and steady. He didn't smile. This was never about revenge, he began, his voice carrying in the quiet. It was never about money. This was always about accountability. He paused, letting the words hang. What happened to me at my home was a small symptom of a larger disease. The disease of assuming guilt based on appearance. The disease of believing that some people don't belong in certain spaces, no matter what the deed or the law says. He looked directly into the cameras, not with anger, but with a profound seriousness. My peace was purchased. I bought that home. But my dignity, my rights as a citizen, my simple right to be left alone in my own backyard, those are not for sale. They come with being human. And the cost for violating them, for those sworn to protect, should be professional extinction. It should be the loss of the privilege to serve. He took a breath. I hope the changes being made in this city will prevent any other family from feeling like a stranger in their own home. That is the only outcome that matters to me. Thank you. He didn't take questions. He turned, nodded to his lawyer, and walked away from the microphones, down the courthouse steps. The cameras followed him for a moment, then turned back to the reporters, explaining what it all meant. That evening, as the sun began to set, Elias walked out to his pool. The sky was turning shades of pink and orange, reflecting on the still blue water. The silence was complete. No car engines, no crunch of gravel, no heavy boots. For the first time in months, the quiet felt like peace again. Not the ignorant peace of before, but a deeper, earned peace. He had faced the thing that invaded his sanctuary, not with a shouting match, but with truth and relentless strategy. He had won. He sat on the edge of the pool and dipped his feet in the cool water. He looked out at the view he had built his life to enjoy. It was still his. It was finally fully his. The fight was over, and he could just be a man, sitting by his pool, watching the day end.